Be me. Mid-30s. Been in the same department long enough to know every outdated password convention and which ceiling tiles buzz when the AC kicks on. Life was steady in that dull, merciful way where nobody's trying to fix things that weren't broken. I'd gotten used to the rhythm. Clock in, skim emails, sip the same burnt coffee our floor insisted on ordering in bulk because cost efficiency builds character. My job wasn't glamorous, but it functioned. Clients liked me, coworkers were predictable, and the most dramatic thing that happened in a normal week was someone losing a stapler and acting like it was a sign of systemic collapse. I could handle that kind of chaos. It fit neatly between spreadsheets and mild cynicism. Then our old department head accepted a promotion. Good for her, honestly. She'd been running on fumes for years, and it was only a matter of time before she upgraded her title and stopped pretending to enjoy the holiday potlucks. We heard her replacement was forward-thinking and deeply passionate about workplace transformation, which already sounded like the kind of person who writes inspirational quotes on whiteboards unprompted. But whatever. I figured we'd get the usual corporate type who says synergy too much and schedules meetings to discuss scheduling future meetings. Instead, we got her. New boss walks in first day, dressed like she was attending a TED Talk about attending TED Talks. Introduces herself as a catalyst for behavioral evolution. I thought that was a joke. It wasn't. She had this way of talking like she'd swallowed a thesaurus and only digested the most self-important adjectives. She handed out pamphlets before she even learned anyone's name. Not normal onboarding packets, either. These things looked like they'd been designed in Canva after a long night of arguing with motivational Instagram accounts. Front page read, Professional Conduct Reinvention Program. Subtitle, A Framework for Correcting Gendered Communication Habits in the Modern Workplace. I actually checked the back for an ISBN number because the document was thick enough to qualify as published literature. Everyone else did the slow, polite nod you do when something feels off but you want to give it a chance. I just sat there flipping pages like I'd found a new species of corporate delusion. Early on, she tried to hide the weirdness behind bubbly optimism. She'd hover behind people's desks, watching them type, making thoughtful humming noises like she was grading our posture. She started asking questions that made no sense filtered through normal human logic. Do you feel your email tone sufficiently dismantles patriarchal subtext? Ma'am, I just sent a calendar invite. My coworker Jenna once said, "Good morning," and the boss asked if she was centering a historically dominant greeting structure. We thought she was kidding. She wasn't. Things stayed mostly low-level strange until she started the scorecards. Behavior scorecards. Literal laminated cards. With categories like micro-assertiveness balance and non-hierarchical phrasing discipline. All on a 1 to 5 rating scale like some dystopian Yelp review of your personality. She'd randomly drop them on desks midday like citations. Everyone I knew walked around terrified of saying anything that could be interpreted as confidently male-adjacent. Meanwhile, I'm over here just trying to do my job without accidentally committing what she called linguistic dominance signaling. She singled me out early. I'm not loud. I'm not confrontational. But apparently my resting voice registers in her mind as default masculine tone. Whatever that means. She'd pull me aside like she was doing me a personal favor. You're a strong communicator, but your presence leans traditionally masculine. We want to soften that. So, talk quieter? No, talk differently. Cool, thanks, that explains nothing. The lectures got longer. She'd corner me in the hallway like some cult recruiter. Men often unconsciously project authority through cadence. You need to de-engineer that. Lady, I'm just trying to eat my granola bar in peace. People started avoiding meetings because nobody wanted to trigger a full psychoanalysis over their word choice. The office went from mildly boring to spiritually exhausting. Then came the manifesto meeting. She dimmed the lights like she was preparing for a seance and projected a 38-slide presentation titled, Dismantling Gendered Communication Through Operational Reinvention. It felt less like a meeting and more like a hostage negotiation with no hostages, just vibes. She introduced a rule system so convoluted it needed footnotes. Every sentence we said at work was now subject to guidelines. No assertive phrasing without contextual humility. No implied expertise without collaborative acknowledgement. No directive statements unless you paired them with something that rebalanced power dynamics. It was like talking was now a minefield built by someone who had never actually spoken to a human being. I tried to adjust. I really did. But the rules were impossible. You'd say something normal like, "I can send that over," and she'd appear behind you like a summoned demon. That phrasing establishes unilateral initiative. Girl, what does that even mean? More scorecards, more warnings, more passive-aggressive reminders that her entire identity hinged on us rewriting our personalities to fit her worldview. The breaking point happened during a client call. It was a simple update meeting. Routine. The client asked if the timeline was still on track, and I said the most harmless sentence imaginable. Yes, we should be good by Wednesday. Apparently, should be good counted as unauthorized confident phrasing in her gospel. She barged into my office after the call like she'd just witnessed a felony. She handed me an actual formal write-up for speaking like a functioning adult. That was the moment the irritation slid into something quieter, colder. Not anger, not even resentment, just clarity. A kind of exhaustion so complete it felt like stepping out of a fog. She wanted compliance. Fine. She would get compliance in the most weaponized form imaginable. Malicious compliance unlocked. Time to follow every rule exactly. Time to ask for definitions of every vague term she invented. Time to act like a robot trained specifically to expose nonsense. I started small. Requested written definitions for contextual humility. Asked her to provide citations for assertiveness equilibrium. Copied HR on every request, every answer, every contradiction. She didn't like that. The more I followed her system literally, the more her system broke. Every sentence required clarification. Every instruction contradicted the last. Every rule she made looped back and strangled another rule. The department slowed to a crawl. Not out of rebellion, out of pure operational suffocation. And I wasn't even warmed up yet. Malicious compliance era, day one. Felt like I'd discovered a new hobby. A petty, administrative, soul-cleansing hobby. The next morning, I showed up with a notebook labeled Communication Clarification Log, because if she wanted to play bureaucracy roulette, I'd bring the ammo. I documented every instruction she gave me, time-stamped with exact quotes. She told me not to project hierarchical certainty, so I asked her to define what level of certainty was permissible. She said, "Use intuition." Asked her to provide the official corporate definition of intuition. She froze, like I'd spoken ancient Sumerian. Wrote down lack of definition for HR. We were off to the races. Colleagues started noticing. They watched me fire off emails at machine gun speed, each one laced with so much corporate politeness it bordered on performance art. "Hi, boss," just confirming before proceeding. To comply with the reinvention program, should my upcoming client email avoid implied finality, collective presumption, or contextual decisiveness? Please specify which verbs fall under each prohibited category. She tried answering at first. Really tried. But the thing about inventing vague jargon is that it collapses when anyone treats it seriously. She'd spend 5 minutes typing what amounted to spiritual guidance disguised as office policy, and I'd reply asking for the operational definition of whatever word she'd just invented. Her responses got shorter, more frantic. Meanwhile, the team started adopting my technique like it was a new workplace religion. One guy asked her how to express urgency without temporal dominance biases. Another asked her whether raising your hand in a meeting counted as assertive physical signaling. Someone else straight up asked if sighing was masculine coded. She held a mandatory meeting to recenter departmental intention. It lasted 2 hours. It accomplished nothing. It generated 17 clarification emails, all CC'd to HR. Efficiency dropped so low I'm pretty sure a group of toddlers with crayons could have delivered faster turnarounds. Clients started complaining about delays. Instead of addressing the collapse, she doubled down like a cult leader whose prophecy failed but insists the world will still end, just slightly behind schedule. She began rewriting the manifesto midweek, adding rules to explain why previous rules didn't work as intended. The thing ballooned to 86 pages. I printed it because watching the stack hit the desk like a brick gave me joy I didn't know I needed. The contradictions piled up fast. She'd say, avoid assertive statements. Then 2 paragraphs later, communicate clearly and decisively. Then, ensure you don't dominate the conversation. Followed by, take initiative proactively. It was like watching someone argue with themselves through corporate phrasing. HR finally took notice. Not because of the ideology, but because the department had gone from functional to please Lord make the bleeding stop in a week. They started asking for documentation. Lucky for them, documentation had become my love language. I sent them the log, all 27 pages of it. Day by day, instruction by instruction, contradiction by contradiction. HR scheduled a meeting with her. Not me. She didn't take it well. I could tell because she came out of that meeting looking like she'd seen a ghost holding a performance review. She passed my desk with a smile so forced it could have cracked in half if someone said, "Good morning," too loud. The next day, she pivoted strategies. Instead of focusing on my tone, she started trying to bond with me in a weird, unsettling way, like a camp counselor trying to make the problem kid feel heard without acknowledging she started the fire. I feel like you're resisting growth. I'm following every rule you've implemented. You're doing it in a disruptive way. I'm sorry. Can you define disruptive within the reinvention program's framework? Her eyelid twitched. She tried giving me off-the-record advice. I wrote it down anyway. Date, time, paraphrase with footnotes. By now, the whole department was drowning. People were staying late because tasks that normally took an hour now required philosophical debate over whether a sentence counted as directional. Her rules multiplied faster than rabbits with caffeine addictions. Every time she added one, the rest became harder to follow. The system was eating itself alive. Worst part? She blamed us. You're not embracing the program in the spirit intended. Sister, we're trying to survive it. You dropped a behavioral nuke and told us to enjoy the light show. The breaking point wasn't an explosion. It was slow, gradual. That's what made it so entertaining. HR started interviewing team members. They came out looking relieved, like they'd finally confessed a crime they didn't commit but felt responsible for. Then I got the email from HR. Subject line, temporary role adjustment. At first, I thought they were transferring me somewhere worse. But no, they moved me up. Not a promotion exactly, more like an extraction. They said my workload needed to be protected while process concerns are evaluated. Translation: I was too useful to leave in her circus. She hated it. Oh, she hated it so much she could have powered the building on resentment alone. Started hovering around me again, trying to reassert dominance. Tried cornering me in the hall like she was ready to stage an intervention. That confrontation came at the worst possible time for her. HR was already circling. The department was crumbling. Clients were complaining. Her guidelines were contradicting themselves so aggressively it was like reading an argument typed by a malfunctioning AI. She delivered this whole speech about how I'd weaponized compliance and undermined collective behavioral growth. Meanwhile, I stood there holding a binder of her own words, each highlighted contradiction like a little neon sign saying this is why you're losing control. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, didn't defend myself. I just asked one question. Would you like your statements added to the reinvention log? She went pale, like truly pale, like someone unplugged her. That's when HR rounded the corner and saw everything. And that's when things really started unraveling. HR stepped in like they'd walked into the last 5 minutes of a reality TV episode. My boss tried flipping the narrative so fast she nearly sprained something. He's being hostile through procedural manipulation. Girl, I'm holding a notebook. HR asked what was going on. She launched into a speech about my tone patterns and masculine-coded communication residue. She talked for so long I swear she forgot to breathe. HR listened, nodded, then looked at me. I handed them the log. All of it. They didn't even hide their expression. That's how you know things were bad. HR people are trained to keep straight faces during bomb threats and severance meetings. But the look they gave that binder? That was the look of someone reading a structural collapse in slow motion. They asked her to step into a conference room. She didn't move. HR repeated the request. Still nothing. She stood there like she was trying to psychically bend reality back into her control. Then she snapped. She turned on me full volume in front of half the team and HR. You sabotaged my program. You twisted my expectations. You made the team fearful of growth. You're threatened by women in authority. It was like she'd hit shuffle on the feminist buzzword playlist and let it autoplay. Everyone froze. HR didn't. They asked her again, calm, firm, to go to the conference room. She said no. Said she wasn't leaving until she finished correcting the cultural imbalance this department suffers from. HR didn't phrase it like an option the third time. They escorted her out. Not fired yet, but that hallway was the moment the paperwork practically wrote itself. The next 2 weeks were cleanup. HR interviewed everyone again, this time with urgency. They dug into emails, timestamps, meeting logs. I didn't even have to advocate for myself. Her work spoke for her. Clients immediately noticed the difference. Without her rules, progress shot back to normal levels. People actually smiled. Someone put music on again. The office felt like a place where humans existed instead of unwilling participants in a one-woman behavioral science experiment. While she was on review leave, the team stabilized. We weren't magically healed, but you could feel the tension evaporate like the building cracked a window. I wasn't celebrating. Not out of kindness, just fatigue. The whole ordeal left me running on low battery, that kind of tired where you don't even want revenge. You just want quiet, predictability, a manager who doesn't mistake personality quirks for social justice opportunities. Then came the email. Final determination. Leadership contract termination. They didn't even euphemize it. When corporations drop the termination word without dressing it up as transitioning out, you know they're done playing. But she wasn't. Of course she wasn't. Because the universe loves endings that drag their feet before giving closure, she showed up on her last day to get her things, and decided she needed a final confrontation with me. I was at my desk cleaning up a report when she marched over like she owned gravity. Her voice was calm in the way a lit fuse is calm. You think you won. I didn't respond. Your behavior proves everything wrong with traditional male expression. Still silent. HR only sided with you because they're afraid of being challenged. Ma'am, they literally documented 86 pages of contradictions. This ain't a conspiracy. She accused me of performing victimhood, which was rich coming from someone who built an entire manifesto around micromanaging people's adjectives. She said I'd undermined an evolutionary project that could have transformed corporate culture. Then she tried to guilt-trip me. You ruined my career. You humiliated me. You abused compliance. But here's the thing. People who design traps always think the trap is noble until they get caught in it. Then it's betrayal. I didn't respond. Not because I'm noble. I was simply done. Absolutely, fully done in a way where words aren't worth the calories. HR stepped in behind her mid-rant. Not soft. Not polite. Firm. This conversation is over. You need to leave the building. She glared at me one last time, like she thought the force of her disappointment might make me crumble into dust. Then she walked out with security trailing behind her. Arms clenched around a box of desk plants and the world's most unhinged binder. The silence left behind was ridiculous. Coworkers hovered near my desk like I just disarmed a bomb. One guy patted my shoulder so awkwardly, he nearly dislocated his own arm. Someone else brought me coffee. Another apologized for never speaking up. It wasn't hero worship. More like collective relief that someone finally pushed the first domino. The fallout wasn't dramatic. Just a slow return to normalcy. A few weeks of meetings without fear. Emails went back to being regular emails, not academic studies in gender expression. The team got their backlog cleared. The office felt breathable again. HR called me in one last time. They thanked me without thanking me, in that bureaucratic way where you can tell they're relieved you kept receipts. They asked if I had interest in stepping into more responsibility since I'd demonstrated high-level procedural awareness. Corporate 4, we need someone sane. I didn't take the promotion. Not yet. I didn't want another leadership circus. I just wanted a job that didn't feel like group therapy run by someone who read half a sociology textbook and decided they were a prophet. What I accepted instead was a lateral transfer upward, better pay, better team, fewer manifestos. Life settled. Work became work again. Deadlines were deadlines, not psychological tests. Conversations didn't require linguistic gymnastics. Nobody monitored adjectives. The break room regained its harmless gossip energy. A month passed before I heard about her again. Apparently she tried pitching the Professional Conduct Reinvention Program to another company. They rejected it immediately. Then someone leaked parts of the manifesto online. People roasted it so hard the comments section basically became a bonfire. Rumor is she's trying to rebuild her brand. Probably writing a Medium article about workplace retaliation through patriarchal silence strategies. Hope it gets 0 claps. I didn't celebrate her downfall. Not out of maturity. Just because the whole thing felt like watching someone argue with gravity and then get mad when the ground won. I moved on. New role. Less nonsense. No scorecards. No hallway interventions. Just quiet competence in a department that actually functions. Sometimes I think about that final conversation. Her standing there, furious that her system collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. Me holding a binder of her rules like a mirror she refused to look into. If there's a moral, it's boring. People who try to reengineer other humans always break themselves first. The rest of us just have to hold on until they finish.